And if you're on the slide.do, you can also, there's some polls there to fill in your location on that spot. And also in here, if you want to change your name, if it's not already, to first name, last name, you could throw in location too. Something that I'm going to do as well. All right, the YouTube is live. I see myself there.
Welcome and thank you for joining us all here on the first of the Synagogue Tech Dreaming Tech 5781. This is a show that is controlled by you, the people watching, to decide what we talk about and how we cover it. We have a fabulous panel who are joining us here today, and I'm going to get the panel themselves to introduce them. So starting off with Marty.
Hi, I'm Marty Atias. I'm in Silver Spring, Maryland. I'm an engineer, both video and audio, backgrounds from radio, television, and music.
Next up I have on the panel is Adam.
Hello, I'm Adam Martin. I'm from A-List Synagogue in London, and I am a community director who has, as we all have, just completed a whole year of doing this online.
Thank you. Up I have Rabbi Tobias, followed by Rabbi David.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Tobias Devek Moss, a rabbi in Minneapolis. I'm from the New York, New Jersey area and have been stepping in as the tech lead at Temple Israel of Minneapolis at my pulpit. And I also am a musician, so I try to figure out how to get the best musical experience out of Zoom as well. All right.
Hi, everyone. I'm David, Rabbi David. I'm a rabbi down here in Miami, Florida, formerly from the Boston area. I'm also a musician, so we have to jam sometime, Tobias. And over the past year, I've become the Torah tech guy, offering tips, apps, tricks, tools to help people navigate these waters.
Thank you. J-Lo, and then back to myself.
Hi there, I'm Joanna. Sometimes I go by J-Lo. I'm an audio engineer by training with a background in recording studios, virtual content creator, musical choir, virtual choir creator, and many other hats. Nice to be here.
Thank you. And I'm Leo. And a year ago was my very, very last in-person live event, which was for the Board of Deputies of British Jews. I do the live streaming for them, and I've helped 7 synagogues set up their streaming in the last year. So the idea of this event is to give you, the people here, as much opportunity as we can to advise and help you. There's no right answers, there's no wrong answers, but we're here to ask your questions and answer your questions. To ask questions, in fact, we've got another panelist who's joined us, which is Oren, so I'll put Oren into the panelists in a minute. To ask the questions, we're doing them in Slido. Slido, you write your questions in there. I'll take the poll off there. You put your questions in. We take the polls according to the questions that you put up, and we answer them in the order that they come in. So you get to vote on what we answer. And this is a great way because it saves us having to have long-winded questions. Before I get there, there's a couple of things I'd like to say. The next session that we're going to be having after this one is the 21st of March, where we're going to have Efret Ariel Shapira. She's going to be talking about pre-recorded and edited music and videos and how to use them in live services. The meeting after that, we then got Pesach. So we've got 2 weeks of Pesach. After that was 11th of April with Paul Richards from PTZ Optics. And he'll be talking about the pitfalls of locating video cameras in sanctuaries and the benefits of movable head cameras. On the 18th of April, Rabbi David, who you saw in earlier, he's going to be talking about virtual cameras. Each session is going to be about a 20-30 minute session on that particular subject, followed by a Q&A. The Q&A can be about the subject that you just covered, or it's about general things. We're not restricting it. It's about the questions that you want to ask. And before we go into the first question, I'd just like to bring in Oren, and it's I should be doing this while I'm actually typing. It's great. And Oren, I'd like him to introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Oren Steinitz. I'm a rabbi in upstate New York in Elmira with a dirty past in sound engineering. I've been streaming for a little over a year, and that's pretty much it.
Okay, so our first question we've got is Deborah Lewis, which is, how do I share text, the Haggadah, and still have others be able to see each other and text without having them to do anything? Anybody got some answers on that one? David.
Sure. So when it comes to being able to see one another, so Zoom has built into it a function called dual monitors. And when I first saw that, my first thought was, oh, I have to have two screens, but that's not actually what it is. It basically takes the shared content out of your main Zoom window and leaves your grid view or your gallery view or your speaker view in Zoom. So if people enable dual monitor, then they'll still have the grid or the gallery view, and they can watch the content in two separate windows. That is something that they have to do on the user end, though, which makes it challenging, I think.
I can.
So, Tobias.
Yeah, I can share. I don't have it fully queued up, but if you get into the world of OBS or vMix, where you can adjust exactly what is coming through your camera feed, as I'm doing right now, then one thing I've done is made my camera smaller to the exact specs that I want. And then next to it, you could pull in a screen capture of Safaria or of a PDF, and you could choose exactly what size you want yourself relative to the text.
For a bit of background for people, do you want to explain a little bit about OBS? We're going to cover it in a future thing, but do you want to just give 2 seconds what that is for those who don't know?
Sure. So OBS basically turns your it stands for Open Broadcasting Software, and it's a free software that's quite powerful, used professionally. And there also are paid versions of it. And it basically turns your computer and your webcam into a TV studio. So you can add virtual overlays. You can have multiple cameras show up side by side. You can make your camera a little bit smaller and bring in a background or graphics that you choose. For example, that's not ready. This morning I was teaching about the Seder plate, and so I created a whole set of graphics that came up, and you can control them as you will. So it's a very powerful engine. I use it for education and for service leading. It's a powerful little bugger.
David.
Yeah, I just wanted to second that. These tools, OBS, Ecamm, vMix, they're all really, really powerful. The way I read the question was, have others able to see one another? These tools will all let you show yourself and text. And yes, you can actually bring Zoom into that broadcast. That's an additional step, but that does make it that there are two kind of different goals that I think that we have. And I also just want to respond. David Lewis said not many people have dual monitor. I agree with you, but again, the dual monitor in Zoom doesn't mean two physical monitors. It means two windows for Zoom, which you can have on the same screen.
Oren.
Yes, if you can see, this is my OBS overlay using something called PowerPoint NDI, which allows me to share PowerPoints on my screen. You don't have to use some fancy software like ProPresenter or Worship Extreme, although this is a great idea. But this program, which is essentially free, allows you to do very complicated overlays and do whatever you want. This is what we use for services every week. The downside is that you that unless you find some sort of overlay that works for every slide, you have to keep changing your scenes. Unless you do something like this, you can put your text here, the camera here, Now everybody can read my text, and especially if I'm in speaker view, and still see me. You can, of course, add all sorts of other things. You can even bring in other people from Zoom into OBS. So you can have multiple cameras. It's a little bit more complicated. There are tons of YouTube tutorials on how to use OBS for overlays and for slides and things like that. So it's
I'm
highly recommended to take the time and learn how to do that.
Adam, and then we'll go on to the next question.
So somewhat controversially, I guess, as this is a how to do things technologically. At our synagogue, we actually try not to share service texts and things like that because we want the community to see each other on Zoom. And so we want them to be able to see the service leader in a big box if that's what they want to see, or the service leader nice and clearly, and also be able to see the rest of the congregation so that they still feel part of the community. And so what we actually do is we go on the assumption that most people that are joining the services also have another device, and so we share links for additional materials on our website, send people to the website so that they can then follow along at their own pace, or follow if they want to, or follow along not by just joining in as well.
Okay, we're going to move on to questions. As we said before, on the questions are driven by you. You enter Slido on your phone or on a PC, and you can. It's just bombed out when it does that, doesn't it? You enter Slido on your phone or your PC, and the Slido will show up the questions. I'm just going to bring it back. Hopefully, it's going to come back to life. It didn't like it when it was brought through. Give me a second. The Slido ID is there. It's 93572. 93572. So let's just go back to the audience questions. The next question we have is from David Lewis. I believe the technical questions are all solvable. My concern is more social. How can we make the experience interactive for both remote and in-person folks? Marty, well, I fixed the thing. Yep.
That's a huge question. How to create interactivity between essentially two different congregations, per people you have in the sanctuary and the people who are watching online. Online engagement is a really important aspect of success for your webcasts. So one way to do that is to have a large screen display, projection or flat panel TV set up in the sanctuary that at appropriate times, not all the time, can show the the people who are watching at home, who are engaging at home, to the people in the sanctuary, and enable cameras in the sanctuary to scan around the people in the pews so that everybody can see each other, acknowledge each other, and you might create space sometime during the service for a greeting time when people can wave to each other and say hi and maybe have audio playing in both directions. There's a way to do that without creating feedback. So that's one idea.
Tobias.
A very small aspect is I think that depending on how progressive or liberal the synagogue, people before COVID especially were afraid to admit that it was live stream and acknowledge the congregation that's not in the room. And so I think that's a very basic step to take to welcome those people, those in the room, those who are joining by feed or what have you. Probably thanks to this moment, we're probably past that for the most part. But depending on how conservative and how abrupt this shift felt to your congregation, it might feel a little awkward even as a prayer leader to start welcoming people into the room that are not physically there. But it makes sense now.
David.
Yeah, I would just add to that we can't treat those who are watching digitally as second-class congregants or participants. That we need to think about how do we allow them to participate in aliyot? How do we allow them to participate in perhaps readings and things like that? If we really want to create a community around both those that are with us and those that are with us digitally, then we have to give some thought to how we engage those folks as well.
So I see that as a really big, interesting part of this, David. How do you make that a two-way interaction? What can we do to do that? I like it when someone starts with a big sigh. That's always going to be. And now
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I'll tell you that. So I can't speak to having people both in and virtually because I'm not there yet. I haven't done that yet. What I can tell you is that when I am leading virtual services now, I am at a number of moments during the service, I'm inviting people to participate in different ways. Number one, right in the chat. Yesterday morning, when we got to the Ashrei, right? I'm like, right now, right in the chat, what are you happy about? What's bringing you joy? And they started writing it, and then I would read those out as we were singing the Ashrei. So the people that were writing knew that they were being heard, that they were really a part of what we were creating. And of course, then during the if Mishaberach L'Cholim, if you're doing a prayer for those who are ill, or maybe Kaddish Yatom, you're inviting people to share names. So those are some small ways, but I haven't yet figured out how to do it when people are also in the room. I think that's more challenging.
Yeah, Oren.
I would just like to echo what David said regarding acknowledging the people to the room, and the use of the chat box can seem awkward at first, but I gotta tell you, once people get into it, they get into it. During the high holidays, we started experimenting with this. Like during the morning blessings, what are you thankful for today? What is on your mind? What is bothering you? And it's you wait these awkward 30 seconds when nobody writes anything. And then all of a sudden, people start writing more and more and more and more and more. And then, we couldn't really shut them up at some point. But the chat is underutilized and should be utilized more. It is a great, very low-tech way of bringing people in and making them feel like they're still a part of the community, regardless of where they are. Without really spending all that much on technology or these fantastic ideas that we have that will allow people to see them and hear them. Because everything like that you add, yes, you can solve it, but then you have to deal with feedback, or then you have to deal with people not turning on their cameras or people unmuting themselves, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is a very low tech, very easy way of engagement.
Thank you. J-Lo, and then I've got it, and then we'll go back to Marty after.
I was going to advocate for the high-tech solution as opposed to the low-tech solution. I think having audio from the Zoom participants in the room would be great. Now having somebody in control of the audio also would be great. So having somebody to mute everybody's microphones, but also having a time in the service where the microphones are unmuted. Perhaps, like Marty said, a projection screen comes down. There's all your Zoom windows. And there's interaction. There's hellos and highs in a greet your neighbor kind of a way, and then mute all. I do like the chat function. I think that's great, but I think auditorily, because that's how I prefer to be in the world, I think it would be much more interactive if you can get the audio in the room and not the feedback. No feedback.
Marty, and then I'm going to come back on this.
Yeah, so I like the chat function is great. If it's overused, it can pull people away from the service, though. The fear of missing out, I have to pay attention to the chat. I have to be reading the chat because I want to know what's going on. It's appropriate at certain times during the service, but can be distracting at other times of the service. So depending on how many people you have, you can turn the chat function off or encourage people to not chat during certain parts of the service. But I do want to get back to the whole notion of engagement, because you really, as somebody said before, forgive me, I just don't remember who it was, said that your online congregation should not be made to feel like they're sitting at the kiddie table. Um, it's really important to recognize that uh, a digital online congregation is now a reality, where it was like not even a thought before, and it's a very important part of every congregation these days for a number of reasons. I mean, if you've looked at any of the analytics, if you looked at who your online congregation members are during virtual services, like entirely virtual services, you'll probably have seen former members who have moved away. You might have seen new people that have never set foot in the sanctuary, that might be in a different country. You don't know. These are ways to build your congregation and build your membership even beyond the capacity of your sanctuary or the capacity of your parking lot. And it's another way to think about who your community is.
So I want to come back on this really quickly because the way I read this question is the interactive for both remote and in person. And I think, as David said, we don't know yet. I also think from my own experience, one of the problems, so I was streaming for a really long time before this and setting up on synagogues. And one of the things we found is that as Marty said about the remote being second class citizens, also what we found, and the trick was a problem, was that when you turn on the microphones in the sanctuary, you suddenly find that people remotely are picking up maybe the conversation that shouldn't be happening. So you've got to work out that's going to be a problem that a lot of people who are going to go back into streaming haven't actually experienced this before because they didn't have this there. We've gone literally for the last year streaming from what is effectively the most perfect environment, a closed set, a closed stage. Sometimes it looks a bit too much like a stage. I'd like to just add to introduce onto the panel two people who've joined slightly late, which is John Fibers joined and Andy Shaw. So I'd just like them to introduce themselves very quickly.
Hi, sorry we're late. We've just been running an event. My name's John, and I work with Leo, but we also, apart from working together, we're members of the Ark Synagogue in Northwood in Greater London, and we've set up all the streaming there. But nice to see you all.
Hi everyone, nice to meet you all. I also work with Leo and John. And, before lockdown, I was running an audio-visual company doing sound and lighting and streaming for events. So, yeah, nice to meet everybody.
So I'd like to just say at this point, if you want to be involved in this panel is here for you to share your experience. Everybody here is giving their time to share their experience. The majority of people in here are actually Jewish. That doesn't mean to say they all are, but we're all trying to share our experience with you here. If you want to do that, then join the thing and talk to us at the end. Marty. And then
so I just want to touch back on the engagement aspect of this and add to it. So one of the ways to build engagement early on in a service is to do perhaps do a prelude. So before the service actually starts, as people are walking in and gathering in the sanctuary, do something for the people online that encourages them to join the stream early. If you have music playing in the sanctuary, have that play out with cameras scanning around, seeing people in there. If you don't have music in the sanctuary, create something to encourage people to come in early, to something visual, maybe announcements, maybe order of service, and encourage them to chat before the service begins. That way they're engaged.
So I'm going to move on to David's last one, and then we'll move to the next question.
I just wanted to highlight the difference between streaming a service and creating a service in which people participating digitally can participate. It's one thing to take what you're doing in the sanctuary, set up a camera or a bunch of cameras, and then shoot it out to YouTube or Facebook. It's a whole other thing, and I think this is where this question is going, is to maybe invite people to come in on Zoom or other platforms and then really be a part of and participate in that service. So I just wanted to put that distinction out there.
I agree. Okay, we're going to move on to the next question from Alison Older. A bigger question. They're always big questions, aren't they? We'll try and solve all the theological ones as well later. A bigger question: how to create a hybrid where we want to see people who are remote and don't want the tech to take over or have the fuss with it. So I think we're going from the question that we're already started on there. Who wants to pick this up first? So I'll start. This is going to be tough. This is going to be, we thought what we were doing at the beginning was tough. This is going to be just as tough. It's going to be a change. It's taken us a year to work out whether we use Zoom, whether we don't use Zoom. There's lots of reasons, as David has said, about various different things in here. This is going to be another change, and the change is coming really quickly. The reality is we probably weren't ready for this change, but we adapted really fast. As I said, my last live event in person was literally a year ago today. But I think we're going to need this. We're going to, the doors are going to be bashed down anytime now. I know that synagogues, that you're just not going to be able to sit there and not allow people back in. So we've got to work out how we're going to do this, and how disruptive. And I think, was it Tobias? Didn't you have some points on this earlier?
I'm not sure which points you're referencing.
Someone said about the fact that we've gone from, or maybe an Oren, that we aren't used to seeing the screens, but we're going to get used to seeing them.
Yeah. And naming it that it's a virtual and in-person congregation, and probably getting away from the word of you guys are the virtual congregation. Actually, you're just the congregation. But one thing to think about your architecture is, this was something that Temple Israel in Minneapolis just happened to benefit from, is that our facade around the ark is Jerusalem stone-like. So we've been projecting prayers onto this Jerusalem stone, and it has a much softer aesthetic than when you can really see, oh, that's just a projection screen plopped in the middle of what otherwise is a different architecture. So, that's something that long-range planning, when you're setting up a space, how can you make a screen look less like a screen, is one way to go about it. And also just maybe maybe it doesn't have to be right in the front where people see it. Maybe it's off to the sides. Think about your space and where the screens could do best.
I've put up a poll that will be interesting to know, is how long have you been streaming? So if you can, on anybody who's watching with Slido, you just point your camera at the your mobile phone at the screen. You should be able to go straight in here and answer the questions. And it's interesting to know how many people have been doing this before or have only started streaming since effectively a year ago, and how far they've been going. So I'd be interested. And when I mean streaming, I mean Zoom, or it doesn't really matter. So it's quite interesting watching this growing as we're going. So it's 52.48. It's almost quite a good number in the UK, isn't it? We like 51.49 seems to be our magic number. Do you want to come on this question, David? Sorry.
I just wanted to share the simplest thing, and I want to encourage us to not talk about virtual. Virtual means not exactly as promised, right? What we're offering is digital services, digital education. There's nothing virtual about it. What we're doing online is as real as what we're doing in the sanctuary.
Thank you. I'm going to take that poll down. So we'll go back to the questions, and we're going to come on this. We know this is going to be a big recurring theme about what we're going to be doing about hybrid, and all the words that we're going to be using. And as I think David rightly says, we're going to be learning the right vocabulary as we move this forward. Okay, the next question we've got is coming from Aaron Goldstein. What are the best headphones with inbuilt mic? Not a lot of hands up, but I'm going to start with what I'm wearing. So I'm actually wearing in-ears typically when I'm doing stuff, I normally use these sort of cans, but I'm wearing in-ear microphones. Sorry, in-ear headphones, and then I'm using a Pile microphone here. This Pile microphone comes in about $30. And the nice thing about it, particularly for rabbis who like to wander around the room, it wanders with me. And if I put it around the back of the cable just plugs into a belt pack if I wanted to plug it in, and that way, and I'm as mobile. So that would be my suggestion. Any other suggestions, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, just about having a microphone and headphones in the same unit. I've never found anything that's that brilliant for that. I find either they're designed for call centers where, sound quality is not that important, or they're used with phones where, again, the microphone is just not great quality from what I've found.
Marty?
That's correct. There are exceptions, but most headsets with microphones are either designed for telephone use or for gaming. In which case, the audio quality and the bandwidth of the audio, from low frequencies to high frequencies, is very limited. To focus on intelligibility. They're not used for or were intended for use with for sound systems, for narrators, for speakers, for recording. So you really want to find something that's going to provide you with a fuller sound than that. As I said, there are some exceptions, but you have to look for something that is specifically for that.
Next up, I've got John, and then anyone, and come up, put your hands up if you want to cover this, Joanna, after John.
Yeah, it's funny, I know Aaron, and actually what he uses I find to be pretty good, and that's simply he uses sort of Apple, in the white headphones with the inbuilt mic, as long as the mic doesn't get too, you don't get too close to the mic and you're not rustling around too much. They sound great. But what I definitely, don't recommend to people is Bluetooth, because, my experience, and this is my personal experience with Bluetooth mics, is they always sound horrible. As as Marty said, the bandwidth is not great. You hear a lot of compression on them, on the audio. It sound, and they don't always connect, and there's often delay between the audio and the video. So whatever you do, I would say plug in if you can, for that sort of thing.
Joanna, and then I'm going to come back on this.
Sure, I agree with what everybody's been saying. I'm a big proponent of separating the headphone monitoring from the microphone. It's just kind of hard to do both in the same fixture. I think speech intelligibility is hugely important, and that if you can't find something all in one, consider separating. Everyone on the panel here seems to have a very lovely sound, and I believe that's because we're all doing it separately.
Yeah, so I was going to come back on this. The point that we typically, before this show, or we join a half an hour before, we do a mic test to make sure everybody sounds near enough the same, so that the quality of the sound that goes out is similar. I just want to give you an example of something really quickly. I'm going to jump from my microphone, which I'm using here, and I'm just going to choose the Logitech Brio, which is, as you know, is a really high quality camera. But you should be able to hear the audio difference of a Logitech Brio. So when someone says to you, "But I've got a great camera and it's got a great microphone," it's
Sorry, that's even better.
That was a great example. That was great.
The one that I went to just in between is the Bluetooth. That's the Bluetooth microphone. Bluetooth headphones. She didn't hear
at all.
Great.
The one that we could not hear. Yes.
Yeah, the one you couldn't hear is the Bluetooth microphone. It's terrible. Anyway, so that's that question. Right, moving on. Thank you for that. Paul Nathan, what is the minimum tech requirement for a small peripatetic shawl to do an effective hybrid service? I think this is a big question. and I think we're going to cover this over the period of time. So I think we want to build this up. We're not going to jump to there because I think we're going to lose a lot of people if we try and jump to that level at the beginning. But we are covering this over the period of the next few weeks. So our next question is from Deborah Winter. So I'm just going to bring this up. How much do you expect the available tech to change in our first year post-pandemic? We're outfitting ourselves for the world we know or the one we may not yet. Marty.
So this is where experience comes in handy, and the value of working with somebody who is an experienced AV consultant or engineer, because they can work with you to find out about your congregation, about your services. They can consult with you about what to expect, and help to anticipate where you might be going. It's one thing to equip for what you know now and have yet to discover about 6 months from now. But in 6 months from now, you may find that what you purchased and what you equip for may not be adequate anymore. And so you may be looking at replacing the stuff that you bought now just a few months from now. So working with somebody who can help you anticipate that and work with you to build a system that will carry you through a longer period of time, you know, what we say, buy once, cry once. You know, you get through the initial purchase to install a good system, and then you'll be set for much longer.
John and then J-Lo.
So I think, and with my shawl, Leo knows this, that I say this till I'm blue in the face. I think the best investment you can make is training, either getting the right people in to help with the sound and the visuals and the tech, or training people from your community, because the equipment is always going to change. But having someone who has a good understanding of what we need to see and hear is absolutely crucial. And I just wanted to ask Marty, have you got every Sound Devices piece of equipment that's ever been made? I was just looking behind you. I'm just so jealous. It's brilliant.
There's a big mix of stuff there.
Sorry.
It's okay. Marty does have everything ever made for all time. The term that we use is future proofing. Right. So you have to think ahead, and that's exactly why you consult with professionals and you get the right people on board. Like John just said, you need to future proof, because you know we can only see so far, but the experts and the consultants can see much further.
So I'll come back on that. I really hate the term future proofing personally.
Sorry.
Because it's all right. The reason I hate it is because you just can't. It's really difficult. There are certain technologies which move forward and certain technologies which don't. And actually, the biggest thing I think we're going to find, everybody's going to find over this period of time, is it's audio. Audio is going to be the hardest challenge for all of us. However, audio is actually one of the technologies which is the most mature in certain areas. And there's ways and means of doing this which make this nice and easy. So we will cover it in more detail about the audio and where we're going with that. Okay, Orin, sorry, you dropped down to the bottom of my screen, Orin, and I keep missing you.
Not intentionally. First of all, hi Deb, haven't seen you in about 20 years, right? Something like that. I guess you're not 14 anymore. So I think that, it's very easy to fall into the pitfall of, we have to have the latest gear, right? We, in audio industry, we used to call it gear acquisition syndrome, that you see something really, really cool on Sweetwater or what have you, and you just have to have it. It's so we have to make a distinction between wanting the latest and greatest and wanting something that works for us. And I think that, the technology that we have right now in pretty affordable prices is more than enough and it's gonna be more than enough in the next couple of years. So I would not wait another year before buying equipment just because maybe things are gonna change. What I will say is that right now in this, hybrid period between virtual and hybrid services, in that time that we're are not in person yet, most of us at least, is a good time to experiment, and it's a good time to learn the gear and learn how to use it. So I think that right now is the time to get new gear and see how you handle it. I mean, we just got PTZ cameras last week that we're slowly learning how to use, and it's a learning curve, right? Use this time wisely, because in-person services are going to be here faster than we think.
Great.
Okay, moving on to the next question, which you've got, which is Rabbi Lear. What is the easiest way to optimize sound for in-person and the online crowd if you can't afford a sound engineer for every service?
Fundraise.
Hold on, let me just get this out. The thing. Who else has got their hand up? Sorry,
Andy
missed the
Shaw.
hands. Andy, thank you.
I would just like to reiterate what John said. I think train some people in your congregation to be able to do a good job. I'm not convinced that it's possible always to do it without a sound engineer. Your basic service, you might be able to get things set so that you don't have to do much, but really you want someone sat at the controls so that if someone moves really close to a mic, you can turn them down. If they move away, just to have a pair of hands who's really got their eye on the sound particularly.
Can I ask a follow-up to you, Andy?
Yeah,
Sure.
please.
Do you think that needs to be an expert in the field or someone who is trained up for just that specific function and hangs on that?
It's really hard to say. I mean, I would get a professional in to teach people, volunteers in the community. I mean, just having someone in to do it the first few times and have 2 or 3 volunteers just watch will go a long way to helping run the audio side, certainly.
Adam had his hand up next, so
I'd just like to back up that comment that being taught by 2 of the expert sound engineers in this room, they've then allowed me to continue to run the sound for the last year, and on the whole, it's been okay. Occasionally, we come across issues where a guitar might drop off, or the sound. I get a sound engineer that's running and can make changes on the fly to the way that the microphone picks up the person and the tone. But on the whole, it's not bad enough that anyone actually ever notices, apart from probably the expert that can hear it.
So I would come back on that very quickly, and I'll say that the sound quality is something that everybody's ears get more and more adjusted to, and the quality has to go up and up and up, because then when you notice the difference, when it drops, you will notice it. So I think you've got some good points there, Adam. I think it's going to be interesting how people get used to and what they're expecting to hear. Marty?
So simplicity may be the goal, but complexity is inevitable, and sound quality is paramount. It is more important than video. If you have good sound and no video, what you have is radio. If you have good video with poor sound, you have technical difficulties. There are ways to, so one of the problems is that when relying on volunteers from the synagogue is what you have is essentially a rotating cast of characters who all need to be trained, and you need to provide continuous training for new people as they come on, at whatever time interval that might be. But there are ways of automating a lot of the functioning. depending on how complex your service is. It's more difficult to do it when you have a lot of musical instruments playing. Like if you have a band, it becomes more difficult. But if you're pretty much a speech driven with a cantor, fairly simple structure, it is easy. It is not difficult to do um, digital signal processing, which effectively can replace a sound mixer and automate a lot of the functioning. Um, it's not ideal, but it is possible. And then to provide some fairly simple controls to make changes and control certain aspects of it. You can put a set of buttons on the bema for the rabbi or cantor or something to push a button to change the function of the sound system to open this mic or close that microphone. And they're labeled and they're lit and they're very easy to use. And that's one way of doing it.
Yep. Okay, moving on. Is anybody else on that one, or I'll move?
I just wanted to say very sorry.
Sorry, John. Yep.
Yeah, just I totally agree with everything that's been said, but I also, remember in your congregations, you one of the big things about sound is people can learn it, but in our shul, traditionally, I mean, 3 or 4 years ago, we had, the shamases were, by and large, men in their 70s who had trouble hearing anyway, and there was often feedback and stuff, and I just think it's about giving the right people the right job. You have lots of musical people probably in your congregations. You need to have a good set of ears and know what you're listening for, and you can be taught the tech, but you can't be taught to be able to hear what you're hearing is good or bad, or so I think that's really important to get the right, maybe use musical people.
Okay, moving on. The next question, this is the one that all the music people in here are going to love. Is there any real solutions? Oh, I've gone and ticked the wrong button. Is there any real solutions from Howard Saffer? Are there any real solutions to allow for several people remotely to sing together in time?
I'm just going to interrupt you for 1 sec, Leo. There's a repeat malicious entrant, unfortunately. So if you have co-host powers, just don't let anyone in off the waiting room. Thanks. Can you restate the question, Leo?
Yeah, Howard Saffer, are there any real solutions for allowing several people to remotely sing together in time? J-Lo.
Unfortunately, no, not that I know of, unless there's an app called Jamkazam that has had limited success. However, you have to be within, I believe, like 150 miles of each other and all able to access, I guess, the same server. That the latency can become that small, but it is the pain of streaming your musical. You just can't do it, and it's unfortunate.
I saw Orin.
Yes, there is another app called Sonobus or Sonobus. I don't even know how to pronounce that, which again works much better if you are about 100 up to 100 miles away. It requires a different server. It's a huge pain to get it to communicate with Zoom. Basically, the answer is no. I mean, it is great for rehearsals that everybody can just get into the server. There's still some latency. But it's not as bad as regular Zoom. But a friend of mine said by the next pandemic we'll get this right. Right now, sorry, nope.
So it's actually it's a problem of physics, and the problem of physics is that if we stand outside and we see and hear a thunderclap, and we know that there's an X number of seconds that it travels from one end to another, and you think about that, when I was growing up, you counted for a number of seconds and you said that was X number of miles, or you worked it out. If you now think that's exactly the same problem, you're trying to send things across in a way. The issue with it in this is it's more to do with the, it's just when you're seeing and you're hearing sound. Even if you think about the problem you have in a theatre or in a synagogue where you're hearing the sound at the front, and by the time you get to the other end, it's echoing around, or if you're at a big stadium, you're hearing it. It's that problem. Tobias.
By no means a full solution, but one thing to experiment with is sequential singing. So, for example, with that classic Vishamru V'nei Israel, we have one person sing that chorus, another person sing the verse, and if you just hang on an E7 chord, you can get to the other person and kind of fall into the other half of that piece. And there's, like with someone mentioned Ashrei, you could pass Ashrei verses around. So also, if you rehearse that, you can get the sequential sounding pretty good. And one other thing, musical director Don Nadell of B'nai Jeshurun in New York City has, with very high-level musicians, experimented to get musical communication even with the latency, playing sort of out of tempo and modal music, some stuff that Miles Davis would enjoy. But to go into those waters, you'd have to be really top level musician.
Okay, moving on to the next question.
John had, I don't know if you saw his hand.
Sorry, John, I missed you.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Leo. No, just to say that we did something on StreamYard actually with musicians playing with each other, and once if they're playing with each other, once you get used to the latency, you can sort of get you can actually compensate for it when you're playing. But I think it as everyone else has said, in the general synagogue setting, there's no way around it. Because what happens with the latency, everyone just slows down. Because I use a thing called Jamulus to rehearse with my choir, and it's great, and we get we can sing together, but every number just slows right down because we're all hearing it slightly late. So it's a shame.
Okay. Just to remind everybody, the questions go into Slido. There are a number of questions out there at the moment, so please vote on your questions you want answered. You choose which questions you want us to answer, and we try and answer them in those orders. You've also, it's up to you to put in questions you want, and if you're out there and you're watching this, please join us, or you want to be able to answer the questions yourself, or you want to give your information or your details to everybody else, please, we welcome people to join this panel and try and help everybody in here. Okay.
Leo, how should they get in touch with you if they do want to become a panelist?
The best thing to do is to register on here, or if you want to, my email address is leo@mindell.com. You can also join if you see so it's just leo@mindell.com, and I will put you down and join the details. And we've got a group that we meet on a Thursday just to make sure we're ready. We do a tech test earlier so that we can try and get the sound to sound good for everybody to listen. Okay, we've had lots of people suddenly answer the questions. I'll put them in their order. Okay, the next question we've got is from Brody Hefner. In addition to the rabbi or other Zoom presenters, how many others should be assisting to administer the streaming event, tech support, etc.? Adam, I know how many you'd like, but how many, Adam?
So we always have at least two for a service or something like that. We have somebody who's we're leading our services from our sanctuary and have done all the way through. And so we have me or someone else sat in the sanctuary controlling the Zoom from behind the camera and controlling the sound. But we also always have at least one other person on as the security person. So that person can help basically patrol, to be as security as they would be in person. Look out for people that might want to cause trouble, or have people be around so that they can jump into action if there is somebody who's being mischievous, like we had on tonight.
Thank you. Others? David.
I think the answer to the question lies in part in what is your setup, right? How many different tools are you using? I agree 100% that having someone who is dedicated to Zoom, not so much to help those of us who are leading, but to help those who are participating. If someone's having trouble hearing or being able to answer questions, sort of be a customer service person for those who are watching. The only other thing I'll say is that we should all be or have a Zoom master. That is to say, when I'm leading a service, I spend a lot of time creating my setup so that it's kind of push button easy, right? I know what to do, and it all, of course, things break down. But generally speaking, I don't have to deal with technical issues because I know enough and I've set it up in such a way that it just works. If that's not you, having someone else to do that for you is really important. And I would argue that the reason why is that at the end of the day, the most important thing here is that we're davening or that we're teaching Torah. And if the technology is taking away from that, if we're not able to focus on our davening or our Torah because of whatever, Ecamm, OBS, or anything else, or Zoom, then doesn't matter what technology you have, you're gonna give a terrible offering to your congregant. So have or be a Zoom master, I would say.
John.
Yeah, I just completely agree with what Rabbi David just said. But also, you can. It doesn't matter how small the job for someone on Zoom is. If you're sharing liturgy on screen and you get someone to be the person that shares it at the right time. Lovely things I've seen, like in Adon Olam at the end of a service, people on a Zoom, people will spotlight different people singing along, and it's just lovely. And it's small things like that. People, there are people who want to help, and it may sound like a sort of a trivial job, but it really, even having 3 or 4 people, as long as you all know, you're on a WhatsApp group and you can communicate with each other, and people, it's another pair of eyes watching and making sure it's all going smoothly.
Marty, and then back to Tobias.
Like any functional system, there are components and parts that each have a role, and each part has to do its job and do it well for the entire system to function. So, for example, if you have a PTZ camera in the sanctuary, you have to have somebody who is operating that camera. And if you have more than one camera, you have to have somebody who is switching between the cameras. So on the Zoom side, you generally have roles such as somebody who is just doing spotlighting so that the correct image is appearing on everybody's screen. Communicating with people who are maybe screen sharing. You might have somebody who is moderating the chat to make sure that there's nothing inappropriate going on. Somebody who is moderating or watching the waiting room, as we have an issue here with this very show. So identify those functional areas where you want to allocate somebody to focus on that job and that one job, just so that people don't get burned out and get too complex.
Thank you.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the one job per person is best if you can make it happen. I know that this might be the case for some of you, that you feel like you're the best at these technical jobs as they first present themselves. But even though I can spotlight and lead the service and draw on the overlay at the same time decently well, eventually it starts breaking down your attention for the primary task at hand. And so as much as you can outsource that, and then also, as Marty was talking about systems, you want to build redundancy into your system. So make sure that there's not just one person who has the drop-in video files. Make sure there's a second person, or maybe you are the second person in case their connection goes down or they can't show up or whatever. You want to have every task have at least 2 people who could switch in and do their best juggling both if necessary.
And it's great when somebody answers your question or answers the bit you were going to say is just as you're about to say it. So Tobias, the thing I would say on that is we're moving into this. This is going to be the next stage, as we said earlier. We've got to make sure that you've got the staffing to do this. Otherwise, we're just going to get burnt out again. I've spoken to many clergy over the last year who are feeling completely zoned out because they've done so many live services. It's service after service after service, and it's hard work doing this because it wasn't something they were planning to do online. The same is going to happen when we're going to go back in person, and we're going to have the you need to have a rota of people who can do it, so that you're not relying on one camera switcher or one person that can do this. You need to bring in extra people. Okay, moving on to the next question. We have from Alan Sherman. We have a culture of not being high tech in services. We don't want camera people roaming around the sanctuary. How can we be unobtrusive yet inclusive? Okay, Oren.
Well, there's two parts to this question. One is the technical side that yes, you can use PTZ cameras, which are very unintrusive, and you can pan, tilt, and zoom them on different people in different sections, and get an arc shot and a near-to-mid shot and things like that. That is the technical bit. But the bigger question here is, yes, we have a low-tech culture. It does not mean we will always have it. A year and a half ago, most of our shuls would shudder at the thought of streaming. Even if they were not halakhically observant, this is not what this is about. It's about, no, we just don't do this. It's weird. I don't want people seeing me on the internet, blah, blah, blah. 2 weeks before COVID hit, my board voted down a motion to start streaming. 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, when COVID hit, I just started Zooming because I'm of the school that it's better to ask for forgiveness than ask for permission, and we haven't looked back since. And now we've found out, that we're reaching a lot of more people than we have before, because all of our shut-ins and all of our people that live 45 minutes away don't want to drive on Friday night, don't want to drive on Saturday morning. Even people who live down the street don't really want to put on a pair of pants. That's a different story. But generally, culture changes a lot. There's the classic story of the cantor changing the melody to Lechadodi, and everybody's annoyed because they like the traditional melody, and 3 weeks later the cantor sings the old melody again and said, oh, why did you change the traditional melody, right? A traditional melody is 3 weeks old, and our culture can change just like that. Yes, when we go back to the sanctuary, it's going to be weird seeing cameras and screens in it. It's definitely weird. But 3 weeks later, it's tradition.
Marty.
So a year ago, so many of our most treasured traditions became impossible. We just couldn't do them anymore. But we've been able to replace them or add to them with brand new traditions. So this digital first congregation, this digital first mode of worship is a new tradition. And it's a new way of doing things. And it's a shift in the culture. Absolutely. And the reality is, for better or for worse, that digital worship is here to stay. And I think that's a good thing. That's one of the silver linings of this whole pandemic experience, is that it's shown so many congregations that would never have, as you just said, voted it down. The very concept of streaming is now commonplace. It's accepted. It's the new reality, and for so many reasons should continue. And so, yeah, it's a little shift. It's going to be a change in physical presence, but it's what's necessary to continue.
David?
Yeah, I just want to honor Alan's question and all of our responses. I agree with everything that everyone has said. I also think that there are ways to do it in unobtrusive, low-profile ways. What Rabbi Tobias said about the Jerusalem stone, oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. How the words sort of become a part of the sanctuary. That's just so beautiful. In our sanctuary, we they have a bunch of other crap that they don't need, but they have these really nice, I think they're maybe 14-inch flat panel displays that sit on each Amud. So the rabbi and the cantor each have one. There's an iPad sitting on the Amud, so for the switcher. And if you were in the sanctuary, you would have no idea that they were monitoring and switching what's also going out. And I think you can do that with cameras. It takes a lot of research, a lot of forethought, but I don't think that this shift that we're going through is going to upend everything. I think we have to be thoughtful about how we implement the new technology.
So we have coming in 2 weeks' time. Couple of weeks' time, we have Paul from PTZ Optics. They are a manufacturer of these types of cameras that we were talking about earlier, and they are heavily used in certain Christian setups, and I've seen them in use in lots of synagogues as well. That I think that answers the question about being intrusive, but it's going to be as I think everybody said. I think from my side, the interesting point is that at the moment, our optics of going into a synagogue, it looks like a certain way. And when, as you said earlier about the change of both of the traditions, and Oren was talking about the change of traditions, I think you're going to, at the moment, the first time you put a camera in there, people are going to just, their eyes are going to be drawn to it. And then a few weeks' time, if it's intrusive, if it's in a corner, they're going to ignore that it's there. But it will be a big difference the first time they see it. So we're going to see, and we're going to cover that more. John, and then we'll move on to the next question.
Yeah, just quickly and expanding on what you're saying, I think the big mistake people make, and we see this quite a lot, is just try and they see what another shul is doing and they say, right, we're going to have it all, and they try and put it all in at once, and then A, you get technical problems, and B, it's like a massive change. You can introduce stuff bit by bit and see if it works, and don't try and rush it all is what I'd say.
Okay, JLo, and then I'm just going to.
It's okay. I was just going to say incremental change is probably the best way to move forward. Things can happen. Things can change slowly and maybe one at a time. Maybe you don't do 5 changes in 1 week. To give people a chance to get used to it like they got used to Zoom.
I see. Okay, so the next question is coming from Buff Medineriton. I'm sure I pronounced that wrong. Of the panel, what is the average size of congregations you guide, are part of, you work with? So going around the congregation, Tobias.
Temple Israel Minneapolis is over 2,000 families. And we've got 5 or 6 clergy, ranging from technically able to technically not able.
Okay. Who else has got a hand up? Oren.
Congregation Kolami in Elmira is the exact opposite. It's about 150 member units with one Kolbo clergy. I'm the rabbi, cantor, and janitor, and plus my rabbinic intern, Malachi, who is very tech savvy, and it helps a lot.
Okay, so I just changed view. Marty.
As a consultant and contractor, I've worked with congregations of all sizes, from under 100 to 1,000 or more.
Brilliant. Who have I seen? David?
Yeah, I was a congregational rabbi of a synagogue up in Boston of 250-ish families for 20 years, and then I got smart, and now I just play with kids all day. But the synagogue that I'm at is also about 250 families.
Who have we covered? Adam?
Yes. So we're in the middle, and we've got about 1,500 families.
So myself, sorry, JLo.
I would just
everybody's
expand
bouncing
that
around my
question.
screens today.
I just would expand the question, thinking, so that's your membership. How many people have been attending services, and has that increased or decreased? I'd be curious to know.
Wow.
sorry.
That's an interesting question. So myself, John, and Andy, we've been involved in synagogues from the smallest of around about 150 up to the biggest, just as actually probably is Adam or others, where they're around about 1,500 family. We count as families in the UK is the way we normally count it. As for the membership, as for the attendance, and that's a really good question, is I think it's a very different attendance over the last year, and that's going to be the interesting thing to see how that relates. So the first for the synagogue that I'm involved in mainly, which is the Ark, we've actually been doing our High Holy Days. Where this will be our fourth year, coming into our fourth year of doing live streaming all the High Holy Days. And we will be seeing this time what that means to the actual attendance and how that comes through. As part of that question, as a follow-up on that question, I'm going to put up a live poll, which is when should we be holding this? So at the moment we're holding this, be very interested. We set this up originally at 7 p.m. UK time, or which turned out to, as we know, that the clocks moved. But the question is, should we keep the clocks to the stay at East Coast time at 3 p.m. and the UK move the UK back to 8 p.m. So I'll be really interested to see what you think as to the two times that will fit in best for you. So should we stay at 8 p.m. should we go to 8 p.m. and 3, which will be 3 in the afternoon in East Coast, or would you want it slightly earlier, an hour earlier? So I'd be interested to know what you think of that. So it's great when you get these questions coming in and you can interact. If anybody's interested, Slido is another one of those nice interactive things that you can use in your services. Maybe not for questions like that, but coming back to the question that we asked right at the beginning, which I will put up again so we can see where we are, which is where we are on the word cloud. So this is just showing where people are watching us from. So it's a really interactive way of seeing where people are actually watching. So it's not surprising for our first show. It's predominantly coming from the UK and from America. But it's interesting to see how, as people type in really quickly, how they can interact and adjust this. We use this and we thank the Anne Frank Trust. It's their license that we're using. We use this on an event with them a couple of times, and it's great to see the live interaction and see how people can actually interact. Coming back to that question, you're interacting without actually necessarily always bringing voices into the room. So that's an interesting way. Okay, so I'm going to just take that off. We're coming down to our last couple of questions here, and then we'll be finished. Tips for live from Tobias, a question here. Tips for Zoom live streaming mic setup for two singers, musicians sitting next to each other, both singing, one playing guitar, one percussion. How complex can that be? Do we have some suggestions? Marty?
Can be very simple, can also be very complex. And the difference is going to be in the acoustics of the space that they're playing in. If you're in a very reverberant space, if you've got lots of hard, flat surfaces in the area where they're playing, you've got lots of reflections. If it's in a big open space, or if you've got uneven walls or things that don't create a lot of reflections, it'll be easier. It can be as easy as setting up two microphones, one for each person, with the right microphone and at the right angle. Each microphone can pick up the instrument and the person singing. On the other side of that, it could take 4 microphones, one for each instrument and one for each voice.
Anybody else before I come back on this one? John?
Yeah, I mean, you just have to practice with it. Definitely turn on natural sound within Zoom. Make sure that you've done that. But you can get amazing, as Marty said, you can get an amazing if you're listening to the sound and it sounds amazing with from your ears in the room. You could use you could even use a stereo pair of mics or a couple of mics. Just so it's about experimenting.
Oren.
If you're talking about home streaming or streaming or zooming, where you don't really have a great system, my recommendation for the interface that you use for your computer has changed 180 degrees in the last couple of months. I used to recommend one of these USB interfaces with 2 or 4 inputs and to mix with the digital audio workstation. I found that it's just way too complicated for most people, and they fiddle with the tech stuff a lot more than they need to. Right now, what I'm suggesting is USB mixers rather than interfaces. Putting a link in the chat for something. They're cheap and they're super straightforward. For less than $200, you get something that has 4 inputs, 4 microphone inputs, has reverb, has compression on every channel. You just mess around with it a little bit and you get, for Zoom, fantastic sound, right? We have to remember we're not recording the next J-Lo album, the other J-Lo, right? We're trying to get intelligible sound out to our congregations, and something this simple that just allows you to turn up and down your volume and up or down your reverb works fantastic for most people and gets very good sound quality into your computer and out of your computer if you want to monitor your.
So my reply to that is 2 things. First of all, good sound quality is down to headphones. That is your number one issue. If you're talking about 2 people in the room, you've both got to be wearing headphones, because if you're trying to do anything with Zoom, if you're not wearing headphones, you're going to get the feedback. The second point I would say, and actually some of the best I've heard of where you've got live musicians, typically when you talk about music playing is very different to vocals of just people talking. You want reverb, you want the sound of the room. Dry sound and voice, which is what you're hearing of us now, is great for speech. But when you want music, you want some of that room, otherwise you don't have that acoustics. So actually I found quite often things like the microphones like the snowballs work really well in the music environment, because you just set the music back, people are playing. When you've got 2 people singing next to each other, you let them sing in the room and make it sound, because actually that's the experience you're trying to replicate. You want to hear what you would normally hear if you were hearing in a room. So you want to pick up the whole of that within reason. But as I say, you've got to be wearing headphones. If you're not wearing headphones, it just all falls apart. Marty.
Good points there. I want to make a couple of distinctions because it will completely change the requirements and the setup. If you're recording or doing a Zoom of musicians playing at home or playing live in the sanctuary, those are 2 very different scenarios, and your setup might be completely different. The other thing I want to say is that there are good acoustics and there are bad acoustics. So even if you're playing at home and you're playing in a room, and Leo was suggesting set your microphone back a little bit to capture the sound of the room, the sound of that room may be horrible. If you think about what reverberation is, it's a whole complex series of reflections that are densely collected together. And if you think about an echo, so you speak and then something is reflected and comes back to you. And if that happens just once or twice or 3 times, that can be very confusing to the ear temporarily in terms of time, because when those reflections come back to you, they can interfere with each other, and your mind just doesn't work that way. But if you have 1,000 of them and they're all close together, well, that sounds like very natural reverb, like in a sanctuary. A lot of sanctuaries, especially stone sanctuaries, have beautiful acoustics, like the reverberation is just so rich and warm. And that's great. That's really good. So getting that in proportion to the performance makes for a beautiful sound.
J-Lo, and then we'll move on to the next question.
I would just say that the more mics you have, the more control you have over each individual sound, and it would create a better balance, especially when you're having. The original question was about percussion next to a guitarist. If you're in a sanctuary, you may not have needed to mic that percussion to hear it throughout the whole sanctuary, but you would need to mic it if you were going to be sending it across Zoom, so that you can control the level and get your balance correctly. So, 2 singers, 2 vocal mics, 2 instruments, 2 more mics has better chance of balancing that better before you send it out.
Thank you. Okay, next question we have. We're coming to the end. We're going to run up to past, and then we're going to stop there. Oh, I keep hitting the wrong button. I'm going to get used to this eventually. The question comes from Mike Harris. If we use a Pile headset like I'm using here, an in-ear headset, is there a good Wi-Fi system that could allow the service taker to roam around the bimmer? So I'm going to ask if anybody has any thoughts. So I'll say, first of all, that this microphone set that I'm using is actually designed to plug into a belt pack. So you'll see that when you buy them, they come with 2 different connectors. When you look at the Pile on the on Amazon or wherever you decide to choose it, there's lots of different places that sell them. But you'll see it has 2 different connections, and they depend on which belt pack you have. It'll screw in or it'll plug in. So that's that side. There's a number of other in-ears that if you want to go to, but there is a lot of issues around the wireless side of this. I'm going to pass over to John and then to Marty.
Yeah, I just think by Wi-Fi, I mean, you know, I personally wouldn't go the digital Wi-Fi radio mic option in a live environment. I do use them for, you know, filming and recording, but again, you know, it depends what you're prepared to pay, you know, and they're not cheap, but Sennheiser I've always found to be a good brand, and we use them, and they will last a long time, and you won't get dropouts or interference. You can go on Amazon and look at any number of cheap wireless kit, but in my experience, it all breaks or you get terrible, you know, and it's really not nice, especially in a live environment when you're plugged into speakers and one of those things drops out. It's really awful. So I would go with a good make like Shure or Sennheiser, but it's not cheap.
Marty.
Okay, so let's. The first thing is let's be clear about the language that we use and the names that we assign to different technologies and pieces, because we want to be clear with each other in any scientific or technical environment. We want to make sure that we're understanding each other and that everybody has the same definitions. So wireless microphones are not Wi-Fi. There are no Wi-Fi wireless microphones. Wi-Fi is a very specific kind of communication, and wireless microphones is not that. There are wireless microphones that operate in the same frequency band as Wi-Fi, but they do not use Wi-Fi as a technology. That said, those microphones that operate in the Wi-Fi band share that same frequency space as real Wi-Fi, and they can interfere with each other. So, and I've seen this firsthand. I installed a system that uses that frequency band in a sanctuary, and what happened was that neither the microphones nor the Wi-Fi were reliable until I shut the microphones off. Then the Wi-Fi became reliable, and so I had to replace the microphone systems with different wireless microphones that operated in a different band, and then everything was peachy.
We can go in a long distance of this one. There's a lot in there on why, but the digital systems out there, as Marty said, initially everything was in the same band, and now they've started separating certain things out in certain areas. But actually, it's all to do with different countries have different bands which they can use on different areas. I think that's a subject that we can cover for another area, another time, to go on to there. Okay, last question we have at the top, and we're at the end of our hour, or our end of our hour and a half, is: are you using Restream to send this out on Sundays? Yes. This is coming out of Zoom as the production element. If you're interested, we're actually producing this out in HD in Zoom, and we can show you how to do that at another session. You use a Facebook portal. If your Facebook portal joins a group, joins a meeting, your meeting goes up to HD. So it's a simple way to get you straight up into HD. We're going out of that into Restream, and Restream we're going out into Facebook and YouTube. So that answers that question. Thank you for they were all our questions. I hope you've enjoyed this. As I say, we're going to be running these sessions every week. The idea, as you've seen, is to ask the questions. The questions will be on Slido. That way we can get through questions quickly, and we can actually, and you, the people watching, can choose which questions you want to be answered, and what in which order we do them. I'd like to thank the panel that are with us today. I'd like to thank Marty, Tobias. I'm looking around the room. Oren, JLo, Adam, John, and Andy, who was here earlier. Next week, we've got Efrat Ariel Shapiro. She's gonna be talking about pre-recording and editing music and videos to use in live services. 2 weeks after that is Passover, so we won't be running sessions on there. And which multiple choice, because these things you choose. Best sessions. We're going to stay at 3 p.m. East Coast time. We're going to shift back an hour in the UK. So you voted, we listened. There you go, and that's it. I'd like to say goodbye to everybody who's watching us on the live stream. We're going to turn off the live stream now. We're going to continue in the post show in here for those that are still in here. So thank you again for joining us. Thank you for taking